In this podcast, our guest is Brynley 𝗏𝗏, comes from a generation of developers. In fact, their third generation. They've constructed 3,000 homes over the years. And in this podcast, we deep dive into the process of finding sites, negotiating with the owners, getting them to accept a proposal, taking it through the planning process to get that planning uplift, and then the things that we need to get through to constructing it in order to make quite a substantial profit. A very detailed, in-depth podcast. So let's jump straight into it.
Because we've had in the past, whether it be people we've worked with, and that they might have had 7 or 8 meetings with somebody and not got anywhere.
Each one becomes a bit of a chat as opposed to...
Yeah, they're just kind of like, oh yeah, I quite like having a cup of tea with this person and a chat, and because they're a nice person or whatever. But if there's no direction that you're headed, there's no clarity there, then yeah, it can just drift.
Yes.
In other circumstances, you might present it in a way to say, in order to hit your expectation, your £1 million, this is how we will have to structure the deal, or this will have to happen in order to meet your numbers.
Brynley, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. You're third generation of developers. The family have developed more than 3,000 homes over the time. You've been involved in property and development about 18 years. Over the last 10 years, predominantly on the acquisition, the sourcing and acquisition of land, overseeing the developments. So thank you so much for being here. I'm sure we're going to get some fantastic insights today in that process. Tell me a little bit more about what is it you're doing right now.
Firstly, thanks for having me on, Sarge. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. One that kind of started from being on site myself as a general contractor when I was sort of 17, 18 years old. And in the recent past is sort of elevating and moving into more sort of the business side of things. So coming from being on site to currently pretty much day to day working on land acquisition. So finding sites and being able to put deals together, and then moving that all the way through to adding value and managing that process through planning and then the delivery of schemes basically. So yeah, most of my time is spent in managing stakeholders and making sure that the projects that we're working on are sort of heading towards the right direction in terms of what we were looking to achieve, and you know, yeah, more the nuts and bolts of actually acquiring and adding value.
Would you say there's one part of that is the bit that creates the most amount of profit at this whole thing that we're talking about?
Yeah, it's an interesting one really. It's something that I as you know, like I speak at various events and in industry publications and stuff, and one of the common threads that we try to get across to people is that, you know, over the stages of the development process, okay, well, where do you need to focus on to sort of make the most money effectively? And there kind of seems to be a bit of a misnomer really, where people sort of focus on the nuts and bolts of planning or the build and value engineering and scheme optimization, which are really important. But before you get there, where you actually do make the money is on the buy-in side.
Yes.
So you need to ensure that first of all you're identifying the right opportunities that meet the right criteria, and you're securing them in a way that isn't rigid, that can then be affected by things that aren't in your control, like market movements and political things that are going on, etc. So it's being able to put deal structures together and convey that message to landowners.
Yes.
That, you know, we can only control certain elements of the process, so therefore we have to put things in place, clauses in contracts that allow us a bit of movement.
Yeah. So the land is already owned by somebody, but when we look across the country, the vast majority of the country is not built on. There's only a small, tiny portion that is. So the reality is there's no shortage of land. There's plenty of it out there. Yeah. Most of it's not for building. Yeah. And when you are speaking to landowners, you're talking about how you can maximize or increase significantly the value that currently that land has. And we were talking off camera beforehand, and you're telling me about there's kind of 7 stages through a process that you go through. I'm guessing the first part of that is finding a landowner to have a conversation with in the first place.
Yeah,
tell me about that.
The first piece is sourcing. So yeah, identifying opportunities. Firstly, I guess it's firstly about making sure you've got a clear set of guidelines or criteria to then narrow your search. That could be geographical, it could be size, it could be location of specific pieces of land, if it's on the edge of a village, or if it's a brownfield site, or are you looking for land, are you looking for buildings? So you have various pieces of a puzzle there, a checklist almost, and then you identify as many opportunities that meet that criteria as possible. You then might send outbound marketing, direct mail, or something like that, or various different ways that you can try and get some leads coming into your funnel. And then it's about fielding those inbound inquiries, and then going through another series of checks against whether it's viable the further you go into that process, really.
So you don't look at the viability initially. First, it's a case of, does this loosely fit the criteria of could it be developed, as you said, at the edge of a village or something? There'll be various criteria that you're looking at. So you're identifying sites. I'm assuming you don't drive around looking for these. You're probably using tools and software and Google Maps and maybe things like that to help understand where there might be land opportunities. And then it's reaching out to that landowner, writing a letter to them, whatever it might be, to initiate a conversation.
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, there's loads of different ways that you can obviously identify opportunities. You mentioned a few there in terms of software applications. I mean, yeah, driving around, even though, you know, some things are going to generate more than others. So it's about spending your time wisely, but you never discount some of the most simple things. And a lot of people often overlook some of the most simple things in order to get opportunities or leads coming in. And they focus their time on maybe building relationships with commercial agents or land agents or intermediary sources, etc.
Sometimes we miss the most obvious things. There's already brokers out there that find
Absolutely.
sites.
I mean, generally speaking, we've been fortunate enough over the last 10 years to be in rooms with a lot of property investors, asset owners, you know, networking meetings, etc., and come into contact with people where we're trying to help them along the way and steer them in the right direction when it comes to, you know, developing land or developing buildings into multi-units. And one of the first ports of call we will always sort of go to people is, oh, okay, well, what do you already own? Or what any of your family members own, any assets or any people that you know closely within maybe not your professional network, but maybe your personal network that you'd be able to help. Because ultimately the relationship between the buyer and the seller in this case, or us and a landowner, or the person we're helping, a business that we're helping from a consultancy perspective, and a landowner, is, you know, the strength of a deal probably lies within the strength of that relationship.
Yes.
And obviously, if you've got some lower hanging fruit, as it were, people you already know, people that maybe already, you know, have a relationship with, or already know, like, and trust you, then, you know, it's obviously easier to sort of present solutions that you may be able to offer.
Yes.
I guess the thrill of the chase, if you like, which is where I get a lot of enjoyment from, is being able to identify opportunities and connect with those people and identify their problems, but deliver solutions in a way that is, you know, it turns a light bulb on or makes a really decent connection with somebody, because then it's validation really for myself to know that actually I'm doing the right things.
Yes. And we're not just talking about you've got a friend who's got a relative who owns some farmland, that can we go and develop that? We're talking about even buildings or demolished sites, or any site, building, piece of land that could be developed into something other than what it currently is.
Yeah, ultimately anything that you can add value to.
Yeah.
And the process, whether it's a single unit or converting something into 2 units or developing 20 acres of land, the process is the same.
So I was going to ask on that, is there a minimum size or a maximum size you would look at in terms of when you are looking for opportunities, or is it a case whatever comes along?
Yeah, it's an interesting one really, because it's obviously something that, because we operate nationally, you know, you've got to go where opportunities are there, and, you know, you've got something to work with. So there are many areas of the country where it's just too difficult to put deals together, mainly because end values just aren't high enough.
Yeah.
It's difficult enough to talk with landowners, and often in the vast majority of times lower their expectation, because a lot of landowners, a lot of asset owners will have expectations up there, when in reality deliverable value is probably either quite a bit lower, or maybe a bit lower, significantly, or somewhat lower.
And that could be the number of units that you can actually fit on that site, and not how many you can draw on a piece of paper, but what's actually deliverable, and also the cost of building that as well. The cost of that construction may not make financial sense.
Absolutely. I think to hit on a key thing there is deliverable value. So what we talk about often, and that's the same, and a lot of these things that we talk about, whether we're working with as a consulting partner, or you know, we're working with development businesses, and helping them scale, or landowners, we will often talk about the same things, because when you're connecting with landowners, it is about providing value and providing some knowledge to them, so they can be informed enough to make the right decision for them. That might not be working with us, that might be going and doing something else, or it might not be developing at all. But one of the fundamental things is deliverable value versus theoretical value. And quite often what fuels the fire in terms of value expectation, landowners' value of their own asset, is that some people might say, oh, you can build 10 4-bedroom executive homes on your piece of land, and that will be worth X. But in reality, that's not deliverable, because for many different reasons. That might be deliverable, that particular scenario might be deliverable in certain circumstances, but quite often you'll get a scenario where you've got somebody going and saying, yeah, you can deliver, you know, 10 4-bedroom houses. They're going to be worth £1 million each, just for explanation, and that's going to be worth X to you. Whereas we would look at it and go, well, how deliverable is it? What's the chances of getting planning for 4-bedroom houses? Is there an identified need for that unit type? What is the risk in terms of building and selling those type of that business model, executive sort of homes? Or is it better to sort of look at 2 and 3-bedroom family homes, and you can fit this amount on there, etc. And it's about explaining that process. And the more that you can sort of prove that you're knowledgeable with landowners, even if that involves them pushing them away, and then maybe following up, you know, in a month's time or a couple of months' time,
because they're unrealistic,
and then that's quite often a good way of making good relationships. We quite often use a tactic which we describe as us versus them. So, because you're not the first person to sit you know, at the dining room table and have the conversation with a landowner. You're probably not the first, you won't be the last. There's probably another person that sent them a letter that's similar to yours, or knocked on their door, or somehow got their contact information. So quite often we'll just be quite open and honest and real with people to sort of say that yeah, this is what we would do. Other people might not do that, but here's the things that you've got to ask other people. Here's the things that we would anticipate or expect you to ask us. We're happy to provide that information and the answers to that. But if you are then talking to other people, make sure you ask them these questions.
Yes, because you're educating them about the process, well, rather than just saying sell to us or do a deal with us.
Ultimately, because you know, it's a long process, development. You know, and when we're working with, you know, control contracts, option agreements, things like that, and you've got to manage that relationship, stakeholder management, with landowners and other people all the way through the process. And that, you know, that could be 12 months, 18 months before you get into planning, because of whatever part of the process that you're in. And then you've got to go into planning, then you might be working with them somewhat, you know, in some kind of collaboration all the way through the build. So some of these relationships can last 4, 5, 6 years or more. So it's important to make sure that you're moving forward with the right people.
Could be quite a lengthy process.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when you are marketing out, as you mentioned, you may not be the first person that they receive a letter from, and they might not be the last. And so how does that first conversation go then? So they respond to your letter and say, oh, I've just received this letter, and they might be thinking, ka-ching, 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 pound signs. They're thinking they're going to be rich overnight. They've just won the lottery. How do you manage that first conversation? You've heard the phrase, your network is your net worth, and you'll also hear it in this particular podcast as well. That's because people in property recognize the importance of being connected with other people. Property is a people business, and that's the reason I've been running a networking event for over a decade now. Each and every month we bring like-minded people together, an opportunity for you to come along and meet some of those people and also learn from other people on the stage, learn from myself as well. So make sure you book onto the next meeting. We're on the third Tuesday of every month in Birmingham. Now let's get back to the podcast.
So I think there's almost a bit of a precursor to that in some of the language and stuff that we use in our outbound marketing to start with. So what we're trying to do is attract landowners that we want to connect with. We've somewhat got a bit of an unfair advantage often because we are a generational business.
Yes.
We've been doing it a very long time, since the 1950s. And we are family run, we're a small organization. So a lot of these things are things that are likely to connect with landowners because in our experience, a lot of landowners don't really want to be dealing with
big corporates,
you know, volume house builders, because whether that's true or not from media sort of stuff that they get, social media, etc. But also just from a sort of sense check perspective, that actually bigger organizations are going to care about you less as a landowner because it's just a number on a spreadsheet. It's a target to hit in a specific geographical area. They'll have very strict criteria that they work to, and obviously the bigger the business, the sort of more weight that they can throw around in terms of negotiations all the way through the process. So quite often what we've seen over the years is and this manifests when we in some landowner conversations where they've had dealings with large builders in the past, where they've worked with a 𝗼𝗿 or a 𝗕𝘆 𝗵𝗋 or a 𝗵𝗲𝗻 or whoever. There are other volume builders, of course.
Not that many of them though.
But they sort of they'll agree a number and then they'll chip away at that number all the way through the process.
So they grab their attention at the beginning, just to hook in that conversation to start the process. But then they'll start squeezing it as it progresses.
The longer the relationship goes on, whether it's through conveyance, whether it's through surveys, oh, this has come up, we found this information out, that's going to take X amount off of the land value. And some of that can be genuine. But the way that we approach those conversations is that we kind of have we kind of get that stuff on the table straight away.
Transparent about that upfront. These are things that could come up.
Absolutely. Rather than starting with a number and then chipping away, we'd rather start with the lower baseline to sort of say, well, it could be this plus plus plus, rather than this minus minus minus. We're obviously a family run, so a lot of the stuff that we put in our outbound marketing is we are a family run business. We are looking for developments in this location, you know, and stuff like that. So then whether it's right or not, we'd never be able to test it in terms of you know, percentages of success rates and open rates and all that kind of stuff. That's just quite, you know, statistics are quite rife with marketing, isn't it? That we're more likely, in our opinion, to get people responding that are similar to us. In terms of what we've wrote in that letter, for example. So that's the first port of call. But then when you have those conversations,
so there's already some filtration initially happening.
A little bit of
phone.
It's kind of like if you're looking at layers, if you're looking like a net, the first layer has probably got bigger holes, and then the next layer has got smaller holes, and then the next layer's got even smaller holes, until you get to the point where you've got that one that sits on the top of that net, and that's the deal that you do. And that's effectively that's the process that we go through. So we will have various points of the process where we will have what we call decision gateways, because every time you go through a gateway, you are spending more of your resource, whether that be money, and in the early stages it's relatively low expense, it's a business cost, it's sunk costs in marketing, it's, you know,
the lead generation side.
The lead generation, and whether it's advertising or whether it's paying people, you know, wages, whether it's software subscriptions, whatever it may be, they are the costs. But then when you start getting to a stage where you go, okay, well, we want to commission a report, a planning appraisal, or we're starting to spend more time, your time's very valuable. So if we're starting to spend more time on something, then we want to make sure that what we're spending time on is going to be of value to both sides. So we have various decision gateways, and ultimately, you know, that might be a conversation with a landowner that expectation is up there and we just can't work together. That's okay. Well, that's an easy decision to make. It might be a technical thing that we then go away and find information about it, that it's in a flood zone or it's got a restriction or covenant or something technical that might not make it viable. And then we just keep filtering that process.
So at the beginning, you're doing very little filtering, as it were. There's a little bit, and then you're marketing in such a way that attracts the right sort of conversations. Then on that first conversation, what's the outcome you're looking to achieve in that first conversation?
So ultimately, what we work on is what we call a 3x3. So with outbound marketing, in terms of our letters, we aim to send 3 letters to a particular land opportunity.
So the first letter, then follow up and follow up.
Yeah, so like a 6-week period, then a second letter, and a 6-week period, and a second letter. And we don't really measure the success of that campaign, if you want to call it a campaign, until a lag period after the 3rd letter. Statistically, you get better responses from the 2nd and 3rd than a 1st, which would make sense, right? Really. And we use that same methodology going into meetings with people, which is why it's called 3x3. So we send 3 letters, we'll have 3 meetings.
Okay.
And we say that to landowners in meeting 1. We say generally we work on a 3-meeting basis. In our experience, if we've not come to some sort of arrangement on a heads of terms basis or made any significant progress by meeting 3, then history and experience tells us that we're not going to be able to do a deal.
Yes.
There are exceptions to the rule. We might have a 4th meeting with somebody. Some opportunities we've secured in the past we've done in 2 meetings, but generally speaking, it's the 3 meetings, and each meeting will have a specific outcome. Meeting 1, to go back to your sort of original point.
So the outcome from the call is to get to meeting 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Ultimately, you get that call, and then what we would do with the call is we'd then have a look a bit closer at the land, and we'd maybe have a look at some very high level.
So do a little bit of due diligence.
A little bit of due diligence, yeah, not too much.
Yes.
And then we're looking for anything red flag that sort of basically
an obvious problem.
Yeah, an obvious problem that prevents us the need to go to the meeting itself.
This just not going to work for X reason.
Yeah, and that's happened to us in the past. And even now, look, we've been involved in the industry a very, very long time. We've got a lot of experience. We've dealt with a lot of landowners, 250 plus landowners. But we're always iterating our processes. And we have done in the past where we've done a bit too much due diligence, even before we've sent out any outbound marketing. So we'll have a criteria, say it's got to be of this amount of size, or it's got to be in this location, etc., and we'll identify some land. But we have made mistakes in the past where we've gone, actually, before we send out these letters, let's check if it's in a flood zone. Let's look at the designation.
Start going the next net down.
Yeah, and what we kind of realised is that a lot of that is just unnecessary at that. It's necessary, but not at that time,
because they might not even respond to the letter.
Exactly, Sarge. Yeah, and that is the hit the nail on the head, because ultimately you might identify 100 sites. The chances of you probably going to get, I don't know, 15 calls or something. Yes. I don't have any hard data. Yes. We don't really work like that, to be honest. But so there's no point doing due diligence on all 100 when. Yes.
It's a waste of time at that point.
Wait till it comes in, then do the due diligence. And you know what? If there's a showstopper, you explain to them. And you say, the reason you know it's a no is because of this reason and whatnot. But
effectively, meeting 1 then happens on the phone to say, look, this isn't really going to work.
Yeah, effectively, yeah.
Okay, so then you go out to meet face to face. You do so meetings always face to face. You would do or.
In the vast majority of cases, if there is a reason why we cannot meet face to face, we've had landowners that don't live in this country and whatnot, or we've got multiple landowners where somebody's abroad or now come in on a Zoom or something like that. But in the digital age and the leverage age and all these kind of buzzwords that sort of get thrown around, there almost is a sort of a drive towards less face-to-face communication, and we're a bit old school, whether that's because of the generational thing and the values and the processes that get passed down from my granddad to my father to me and etc. but there is nothing like having a face-to-face conversation. Rather than, you can't replicate that on a Zoom call with a digital screen. But if that's your only option, then that's better than nothing.
That's not your first choice.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. And also the first choice is, I would, in ideal circumstances, I would never go to a landowner meeting on my own.
Okay.
We would always go with 2 people.
Okay.
And that is to increase our chances of connecting to, if one person is talking and giving information, another person is sort of, you know, looking and understanding and seeing. And because one of the things we say to some of our consultancy clients, and then we use the analogy of, have you ever been to a doctor for a diagnosis with somebody else, say your wife or your partner or family member, and you come out of that doctor's office and you both have a slightly different recollection of what was said?
Yes.
And that's the same with sort of any interaction really in any landowner meeting, because you're getting different perspectives and you're getting maybe different vibes or different sort of, you're picking up on different things. It's really important for us to go as a pair. And again, coming back to kind of our unfair advantage, really, we're generational, so quite often it'll be myself and my father, 2 different generations. Often we're dealing with landowners that might be generational themselves, because land has been passed down, or it's a business that's a generational business. So we're making those connections relatively easily. If you can't go with somebody, you know, grab somebody from, you know, if Richard's not available in my case, or your business partner's not available, then grab somebody else. And you know, they don't need to be experienced. They just need to be able to sit and take note, the conversation will flow and understand and listen, if that's the case, you know.
Okay. And then during that meeting, what is it you are wanting to achieve? You've done a little bit of due diligence before you've gone there. Are you trying to sense check the owner to see, are they somebody we could work with? Are you focusing on what can we do with the site? What is it you're trying to do in meeting 1?
Ultimately, meeting 1 is about making that connection, and identifying the problems effectively with, you know, what is the landowner looking to achieve.
Yes.
Because obviously if they've got an asset, they've responded to your letter, they're obviously interested in terms of maybe realizing some value from that asset. So there's got to be a motivating factor behind that need, if you like. So it's about, basically for us, it's about identifying what that is.
Yes. What triggered them to respond to your initial communication?
Yeah. What's their motivation behind wanting to get some value from whatever it is that we're dealing with. So a part of it's fact finding, and part of it's more the sort of
creating some connection.
Connection side, really. It's not your first meeting, in my opinion, is not the place to go in and go, right, we're this good, we're, you know, we can do this for
you're not
you.
looking for solutions.
Here's the solutions that we can offer. That's kind of a bit further down the line, really. So that first piece is mainly making that connection and then understanding what their worldview is effectively.
Okay. And so these kind of meetings, how long would you typically spend with an owner? Is it a long meeting, or is it kind of a short kind of meeting we generally have? Does it vary?
Yeah, it kind of varies, really. We would normally allocate no more than 90 minutes for a meeting. You can cover a lot of information in 90 minutes, but when we're trying to add some value as well, and explain the development sort of sector and the space, and, you know, why their land might not be, you know, as deliverable or as desirable or as valuable as perhaps they might think, or what can be done, or here's some of the solutions, here's some of the problems that we're up against, and here's how we can help. And, you know, we dive into various topics in the different meetings effectively.
And at this stage, are you looking to understand if they're already talking to somebody else? Have they already tried things in the past? And
and generally, so a lot of people in the past when we've been dealing with, say, businesses where we, you know, in a previous life we did training, and we do a bit of consultancy as well, and a lot of people have sort of asked us, okay, well, do you have a script or something that you work to, and questions that you ask? And the answer is always no.
Yes.
That might be because we've done it often enough that we kind of don't need anything written down, but in all honesty, certainly in that first meeting, you know, the ratio of ears to mouth, 2 to 1, is how you should be conducting yourself in that meeting. So it is very much about asking open-ended questions and sitting back and listening to what comes back and responding to some of the answers. I'm sure you'll really experience yourself, Sergeant, in talking to property owners and things like that, and it's the same kind of principles, really.
I just think, as you're saying, it's very, very similar to what we do when we're sourcing properties. Similar format, similar conversations. You know,
you could ask one question quite as simple as, tell us about the land, tell us about how it came into your possession, and you sit back, and then before you know it, they've spoken for 15 minutes and they've told you their life story.
Absolutely, yes.
It's quite interesting, really, because, like, if you've ever had an interaction with somebody, whether it's property related or just friendship related or personal, and you've had that interaction and it's involved you talking for quite an amount of time because they've asked decent questions and you've gone into whatever makes you which is important to you.
Yes.
You kind of leave that interaction and you go, they were a really great person. When in reality,
you enjoyed the conversation.
You don't know anything about them. Because they've allowed you to.
Yeah, they're giving you the space. They allowed you to speak.
And that's effectively what it is from an acquisition perspective, from a landowner point of view. Really, it's being able to give them the space to give you the information that might be of value to you. If there are any specific bits of information or any specific follow-up questions, you can either do that post-meeting, or you can do it as okay, you've just told me about this. It came into your possession because your father passed away. Okay, a logical next step would be, okay, well, is it owned by, is it just yourself, or are there any other beneficiaries that are involved in the land? Because these are the kind of information that we need to know. But you don't want to then have a script and go, right, who owns the land? Okay, are there any other beneficiaries? How much borrowing is on it? And go.
It needs to be conversational, because the other thing you mentioned that's absolutely key there, you're there to create connection. And if you're literally running off a script, you're not going to create any connection, because your focus is on information rather than connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fact finding and understanding their worldview is meeting number one. People
do business with people they know, like, and trust, and you're allowing for that to happen. For that to then progress into something. Because if that first meeting, it just kind of feels a bit, you don't really gel, you don't get on, it's very, very unlikely that will turn into any kind of business.
Definitely. I think from that letting them know the process as well, I think gives them confidence. So we would start off a meeting one to say that, as I said before, we work on a 3-meeting cycle. Today is about me getting to know you and understanding a little bit more about the land and a bit about you and what you're looking to achieve. That can be enough for them to go, okay, right. And then also, okay, meeting 2, then I will go away and I will do this. Meeting 2, we will then do this. Meeting 3, we will then do that. And in our experience, if we've not got to sign a bit of heads of terms, by meeting 3, there's chances are we're probably not going to do the deal. They know then there's a clear goal for every single meeting that we're part of. Because we've had in the past, whether it be people we've worked with, and that they might have had 7 or 8 meetings with somebody and not got anywhere.
Each one becomes a bit of a chat as opposed to...
they're just kind of like, oh yeah, I quite like having a cup of tea with this person and a chat, and because they're a nice person or whatever. But if there's no direction that you're headed, there's no clarity there, then it can just drift.
So you're coming away then from that meeting, are you now thinking about, right, what are solutions? I understand what the problems are. Do I need to now come up with solutions? What is it you're thinking next?
We're thinking that we're probably going a little bit more then into the technical aspects of the land itself. So we would then do some desktop studies, some initial assessments. We call it, like, we run an assessment called a potential and constraints check. So we will look at what would be the development quantum? What's the potential from that perspective? We might look at a high level, look into some planning in the local area that might give us some information. We'd be looking at things like accessibility and flood risk and any TPOs and any sort of technical things that might go, that's going to affect what we're able to develop on that site, for example. Because if we don't do that, and then we go into meeting 2 and we go, well, actually it's an acre, we feel like we'll be able to develop 12 houses on there. But if part of that land is in a flood zone, or the access will restrict the number of units we'll be able to develop, all we're doing is kind of filling their head with not false hope, but we're kind of probably painting a picture that's then not deliverable.
Yes.
So we want to do a little bit of that due diligence in that period of time, and then talk to them about the possibilities in meeting 2. This is what we could possibly do, and this is how we could do it, and then sort of see how that goes. Okay.
So meeting 2 is where you're kind of sharing your initial thoughts on what's possible here. Yeah. And so then you've first stage, you've already done some due diligence before you sent your marketing ad, when you've had your first marketing back, when you've had the response back a little bit before you've gone out to see them. Now you've done a little bit more due diligence around actually what can we create here. And when you are looking at a site, you think, I can probably get 20 stories here, or what is it that's driving what you can create on that space?
Often need. It drives what is possible, and then anything that's taken away from that. So density and things like that, we'll be working on numbers where we go, okay, well, we typically will be able to, if it's a rural or semi-rural site, we'll be able to build X amount to the acre or whatever, and we'll be working on those kind of high level sort of numbers. Different sort of criteria and different sort of things that we need to check. If it's a different type of site, a brownfield site in a city, etc., or an existing building, what can we do within the bounds of what we have, and anything that takes away from that, so anything that's going to restrict those kind of numbers. And then basically we're then presenting what could be possible, not presenting the solution, or a proposal. That sort of comes in the sort of 3rd meeting, because what we're trying to achieve in meeting 2 is, here's what we've got back from what we've had a look so far. If we go any further, then it's going to involve a lot more due diligence from our side, a lot more time, a lot more commitment from our side, and we want to kind of make sure that they're with us. So they're buying into the principle of your idea at this stage. And ultimately, what you quite often get in kind of meeting 2, you often get it in meeting 1, to be fair, is how much is my land worth? Because that's their it might be forefront of their mind, might not be the most important thing, but often it's at forefront of their mind. Everything comes down to pounds, shillings and pence, as my granddad would have said. And even if there are other value adds in that process, whether it won't be wanting to give back, whether it want to be leaving a legacy, whether it retaining some units for their family, whatever motivating factors that we're trying to find out in meeting 1, it does ultimately translate to money, because that money will then manifest in a number of properties, or they'll be able to do this with it and not that. So it is all the way through the process. It's about trying to assess their levels of expectation versus where we think the reality is. It's seldom where the expectation and reality are, on par or close. So then it's a case of trying to level that out. So lowering their expectation to where we consider what to be realistic. And we do that through knowledge and value sharing and explaining why this will happen and that can be affected by this, and the reason why we can't do this many houses or what have you. And do you think during that second meeting, when you're first revealing, here's what we think could be possible, there'll probably be some disappointments as well, because they had fairly high expectations? How do you manage that then at that point? Invariably there's disappointment through the process. We're quite adept at kind of and used to sitting across from a landowner and saying, well, it's this much, and they had this much in their heads, often double or treble the number that you might be talking about. And they've already spent it as well in their mind. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Ultimately, if somebody down the pub or some land agent or a volume builder, as I said before, has been in and said their land's worth £1 million or £2 million as a gross value, they've already gone and said, oh, okay, well, what difference is that going to make to our family? It's going to do this, this, and this. And then you come in and you go, it's worth 600,000. You're a villain almost. So there's not a lot you can do in terms of like influencing that or like trying to kind of help with their disappointment. It is what it is.
It's probably just about justifying why.
It's justification ultimately. And even with all the justification in the world, it might be a case of, well, you know, it's just too unrealistic.
Yes.
What we try to do then when we move it forward into a bit more detail, when we start talking about deal structure, is if there is a significant difference between expectation and what we feel is deliverable, we will then look at various deal structures to be able to maximize that number for them.
Okay.
The site value is the site value, but we can increase the value to them in how we put a deal together potentially. Whether that's deferred consideration, whether they're getting all the money up front, you know, because if they're not getting all the money up front, and we can legally put a contract in place that enables them to earn a little bit more money for money that they've, I'll say in inverted commas, left in the deal.
Yes.
Obviously the devil's in the detail, but it's for us, it's all about maximizing that. It's not about the number up there. It's about what they actually end up receiving. We recently got a deal where it's got planning and it went out to market. We had a control contract in place on it, which meant that it wasn't an option agreement, it was a promotion agreement with a preemption clause, so preemption to purchase. So what that means is that rather than an option agreement would give you the option to purchase if certain things are met, a promotion with preemption gives you the first opportunity, so you were at the front of the queue. Yes. So we might have put an indicative sort of value range in place, and they'll go, well, how can they sense check that? How do they know that that range is, we're not trying to rip them off, or it's fair value for their land? Well, they need to go and invite a couple of other bidders or whatever, or they need to put it out to market, which is what often happens. It's gone out to market, it's come back, and there was a competing offer, and it was proceedable. They were a good, decent company at 1.35 million, I think it was.
Okay.
And to put that into context, our offer was 985,000, so a significant difference.
Yeah.
But that's on paper, the headlines, there's only one deal to go with there. Yes. If you're the landowner. But when you start looking into the detail and you're looking at the structure, this is a bigger company. All they're interested in is delivering what's consented.
Yeah.
Whereas we're trying to maximize the value. What's consented now is X amount of houses, but actually we feel that we can get some more over a period of time, and we've got a ransom strip over here that we will access land over there that might be worth a significant amount of money. We're going to work with you in terms of stage payments. There's various different things that we would include in our offer, that when you compare them in terms of lifetime value, let's call it, as was probably worth more. Yes. Is probably worth more. What
they actually end up with in the end, as you said,
is more than that.
Because the way the deal's structured.
Yeah, the structure, the control that they wouldn't have with them versus the kind of, we've already got an existing relationship, that continuity. So there's a lot of things at play there. So it isn't about the money in terms of the headline. Yes. It's about what they actually receive.
Yeah.
And it quite often, the kind of analogy I often use, because it's obviously a popular subject, is that you look at the football transfer market, for example. You know, numbers in football are crazy, stupid numbers, aren't they? You know, but you'll see somebody that goes, you know, top player or whatever, might get the headlines because they've just moved to one of the top clubs for 150 million pounds. But the reality of that is the headline says 150 million, but the reality is that actually it's not 150 million wire transferred from one account to another on the day that they've signed contracts. It's made up of a lot of different things. There might be payments over a 10-year period. There might be bonuses and appearances and all these kind of things at play, and all these different clauses that make up a deal. But all you see is the headline number. And that's how we approach land deals. The headline number, if we present it in a different way to the landowners in that example, 1.35 versus 985, we could have presented it in a different manner. We could have said, actually, the deal is worth 2 million to you, and this is why. So there's various ways that you can do it, and the way that you present it will be off of the back of the information and the connection that you've made in the previous meetings. So I could present it that way, or I could present it this way, and that's a judgment call. So
you're matching your proposal to meet their needs. So it's based on what is it that they said they need, and how can you best fit.
Absolutely.
And you present it in that way.
If a landowner has an expectation of £1 million for their land, and you've done your residual value and you've come out with a value of 500,000, so half of their expectation. In certain circumstances, we might turn around and go, we're not going to be able to meet your expectation, and this is why. In other circumstances, you might present it in a way to say, in order to hit your expectation, your £1 million, this is how we will have to structure the deal, or this will have to happen in order to meet your numbers. Values might have to increase by 5% or 10%. We might have to do this. We might have to, you know, stage the payments. You might have to come in on an equity basis, or various things, you know. But ultimately, how you present it is going to be key.
Yeah, personally, I think this is one of the most valuable skills. I think all of it's important, but this is one of the core skills that you develop over time, the ability to be able to construct that deal to meet the needs of the seller.
Yeah, so I think earlier you asked me about what I enjoy most, and this is it. And this is it, you know, it's about being able to, connect with those owners, find out information, present a solution in the right way, and be able to do a deal. Because whether that project is successful moving forward is kind of immaterial. Obviously, we want it to be successful, we want it to make money for us, but that doesn't undermine the success that you've had, I've had, people watching have had, listening, in terms of being able to present a solution, identify problems, present a solution, and do the deal. When you've done the deal, successful.
And this would be, you'd be doing this at meeting 2 in terms of proposing, this is what it's going to look like, this is kind of why we think it's going to be this, or in order to meet those numbers, we're going to have to do it in this way. You're sharing that level of detail in meeting 2? Or?
So we would be, in meeting 2, we'd be discussing ways that we could do it. And meeting 3 is a kind of full-blown sort of proposal of, here's how after meeting 2, you've said, so in meeting 2, we might say, oh, would you be interested in units at the end? Or you might even get to the point, depending on how the conversation goes, of is there a particular amount of money that you would require up front? You know, as I said before, it depends how the conversation goes as to what information that you try and get from them, and what questions that you ask. But then, meeting 3 is more of that formal proposal, and ultimately we want to get through meeting 3 where if you're not hitting them cold with a proposal and numbers that they've not kind of seen before. Meeting 2 might be, it could be worth between X and Y. And then you see how that lands. And because ultimately at the end of meeting 3, we want them to go, let's go for it. Effectively.
So between 2 and 3, this is where you do some preparation of, okay, this is how we need to prepare information. You're not really doing more due diligence at that stage?
No, we probably might be doing a bit more detailed due diligence. We might be commissioning some third-party reports if required, maybe a planning appraisal if we feel that.
So you're starting to spend money.
You're starting to spend a bit more money. So we go back to the decision gateways, and you go, well, each time we go further in the process, we're committing more resource to it, time, money, etc. So we want to make sure that we are putting the resource in the right areas. We do get scenarios and instances where we've put significant time and money into stuff that doesn't end up coming off, and that's
the nature of this business.
That's the nature of the business, and
that's going to happen. But
sometimes that can be a couple of £1,000s. Sometimes it can be £200,000. And
hopefully not too many 200,000.
Exactly.
But generally, what you'll find is you'll find the odd 1 or 2 that doesn't proceed for whatever reason, but the ones that come through more than make up for the ones that don't.
Ideally, when you're dealing with anything that's kind of planning risk related, if you like, then one of the ways of mitigating that risk is by doing multiple projects of the multiple deals, multiple planning plays, or because if you've only got 1 or 2, then you're so reliant on 1 or 2 coming off. Whereas if you've got 10, yes, you've got to invest more money, you've got to maybe deal with some more investors, etc. But the upside of 1 or 2 or 3 of those coming off protects the downside of maybe 6 or 7 of them not coming off, which in reality they're not the kind of numbers that we would be expecting.
And planning is not formula based. It's not we just need to X, Y, Z and we're going to get result as Y.
Be nice to
Yeah, and that's why I guess you create so much uplifting value, because you go through the intricacies in order to be able to get some approval to do something with it. So you go into meeting 3 with the proposal that they've already got an idea of now, and really you're looking for some kind of verbal written commitment at that point then, or?
Yeah, written commitment, ideally like a heads of terms or something like that. So through the various meetings, we're always leaving some literature.
Okay.
So we would have some market material that explains our business, explains some of the processes, etc. with us, and from maybe meeting 2, we might have a 1-page or a 2-pager with specific information about the site. It's in flood zone, whatever. It's which is valuable to them. They can have that, no problem. Meeting 3 would be coming with maybe a heads of terms. Meeting 2, we might leave them a template of heads of terms, so they're kind of aware of the kind of things that we might be looking to do in the next stage. You're trying to get them primed, if you like, and ready in a position so they can make the decision that's right for them. That might be, okay, I don't think this is right for us at this time, and that's fine.
Yeah, so now you've gone through the meetings, you've got the owner of the site on board. They're thinking, great, we know we want to do this. Now you have to increase the value. You have to now create something of substantial value there. What is it you're doing next then, after meeting 3 and the heads of terms have been signed?
Well, once heads of terms have been signed, from our perspective, there is more confidence that there's a signal there for us to be able to kind of spend a bit more time and resource on it. So this is where we would be looking at a bit more third-party input. As I said before, maybe we might have commissioned it before. If not, we'd be doing it now in terms of a planning appraisal. It's great. A lot of the information that a planning appraisal from a third-party planning consultant will come up with is stuff that we perhaps already found out, already know, but it's always useful to get that confirmation and a bit more information for the sake of 500 quid or whatever it might cost us, or what have you. So it's about spending your money to give you that validation. And come up with different perspective as well. Maybe they might be looking into planning policies and stuff that we may coming up with information that we might not have been able to find out. And then we would be basically looking at refining some of the stuff that we'd already done in terms of, okay, what is possible, scheme optimization and stuff. We wouldn't be spending huge amounts of money at this stage on architectural drawings or anything like that. That can be a common mistake that people can make. Okay,
they go straight to drawings,
straight into getting plans made up and all that kind of stuff. We don't do that until we're much further down the line, really. But from that perspective, it's okay. We might be then having initial conversations with the local planning authority. We might be starting the process of putting together a pre-app or whatever our kind of due diligence that has sort of told us to do. Really, we're working out the planning strategy effectively. How are we going to add the most value? Yes,
it isn't always the same method. It's not necessarily a case, right, we go pre-app first, then we do this, then we do this. So it depends on the site, which is going to be the right route. As you said, you formulate a suitable planning strategy for that development. Yeah,
planning strategy is very specific to the site. That they're generally only a certain number that certain number of ways that you can go about something. So a lot of that is repeatable from site to site, but it's not a set process. But at that stage, we're working out our strategy to basically unlock the most value.
And then in terms of the steps following on from that.
Yeah, so it's all part of kind of a 7 sort of stages of the development process, really. So you've got that front end being sourcing, appraising and securing the deal. So that's the first 3 stages. Then you've got the planning side, and then you've got the funding side, and then you've got the build side of construction, then you've got the exit. So you've got those are the 7 sort of areas of the process. Obviously something like funding, for example, you're going to need funds, different types of funds all the way through the process. So if you were to look at it as a kind of a map, that kind of goes in all different directions. Some instances where you've got planning, it might not be planning, so to speak, i.e. achieving planning permission, it might be permitted development rights, but effectively that is where you are adding value on paper.
Yes.
And the build is where you're delivering the project, but also maximizing the value in terms of value engineering and things like that. And then obviously the exit in terms of, okay, well, what we're looking to do with it, retain units, sell. Are the landowners looking to retain units? Are our investors, or whatever it may be? But you have to consider all those things before you've done, or during the first 3 parts of the process. Before you've secured the deal, you've got to have a good idea of how you're going to exit, how you're going to procure the build, you know, how it's going to be funded, what are the numbers associated with that, and you're piling them into your appraisal process, and you're making sure that you secure it in the right way. And
are you always looking to build out at the end, or sometimes is it a case of we'll just get the relevant approvals in place, ready for somebody else to build out?
That's a really good topic, actually, because we're seeing we've seen over the last few years, actually, but we've seen quite a lot more of stuff put out there in the sort of social space of, okay, yeah, making money from land without the need to build out and stuff, and that it can be quite a profitable business model, but it's very, very niche, and you've got to, and it's unless you've got the experience and the knowledge and the know-how of building out, then it's very, very risky, because you're relying on putting together some planning that's deliverable, as I mentioned before. If you're not au fait with the build side and the delivery side, how do you know that what you're getting planning permission for is going to be attractive to developers that are going to build out, that doesn't have the construction risk or the market risk that's associated, and then you've got that need to sell it on to somebody. It's wrongly referred to as planning gain quite a lot of the time, when in fact it's planning uplift. So for us, we've got a build background, right? So we're always looking to develop and build out schemes, but it doesn't mean that then we can't sell pieces of land with planning should we choose to. But going the other way is a lot more difficult. If your business model is about controlling sites, getting planning, adding value, and then trying to sell on, and you're not even considered the build, that's very risky. Whereas the other way around, that's your business model, is to build out. You can choose to sell with planning if that's right for you at the time.
Yeah, and I guess a site could be such that part of it's sold off, part of it you build, or even at the build stage, it could be built in phases, that certain parts of it's built out, then once that's sold or exit, then you do the next portion, rather than the whole thing has to be started together by one builder to build out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you even see that if you look at it on a sort of macro scale, if you like. I'm sure some of the viewers and listeners have probably seen volume sites where there's 2 different volume builders on the same site, and that's almost a bit of a conglomerate where they're working together to minimize market risk and not flood the market, because flooding the market of a particular unit type is going to be a problem for everyone. So they're strategic in that, and that's the way you've got to approach delivery. And for us, it is about generating value, as much value as we possibly can, all the way through the process. Now, obviously that is monetary value, but there is other value that we're looking to add all the way through to all the stakeholders that are involved. But obviously you've got the planning value that you can add through your permissions, but then you've got construction value. So if you're managing that project tightly enough, and you're value engineering and you're procuring in the right way, that is where we can maximize the profit. So if you were to look at the 7 stages and you go, okay, you make the money on the buying side, so source, appraise, secure, and you manage that money on the delivery side, so getting the right permissions, delivering it in the right way, funding it in the right way with the right people, and exiting correctly, to suit your objective.
That can make a big difference in the numbers in terms of how you manage those funds, what the cost of your funding is as well.
Yeah, hugely different. Even to the point of, and I think it's been interesting for us as builders and developers, if you like, with that background, getting involved in the kind of property investing world, meeting people like yourself. We've been in that kind of space for the last sort of 10 years or so, and it's added value to us from that perspective, because, you know, a developer traditionally has been a trader, right? You build something and then you sell it, you build it, you sell it, you build it, you sell it. So you're recycling capital all the time. Whereas, you know, getting to understand and know the economics around investing and things like that, and talking and conversing and making relationships with investors, it's about maybe building and holding units for the long term, and then how that then feeds into some of the, you know, build to rent and build to sell projects. So predominantly we are traders. We always have been, and we kind of always will. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that we won't hold on to units now that we kind of understand that side of it a little bit more. And that can help in terms of risk mitigation with certain projects. So if you're looking at, say, you know, 10 2 or 3 bedroom family homes that are worth, I don't know, £200,000 each as an example, just using very, very high level numbers, pre-tax and all that kind of stuff. So if you've got 10 at 200,000 and that's a £2 million GDV, and we're looking to make 20% return, which is pretty industry standard. So our return on that is going to be £400,000. Yeah. So from a number of units perspective, the profit is the last 2 units. Yes. So we've got to sell 8. If we're on a build to sell strategy, we've got to sell the 8 to get out of debt. Yes. And then we've got to sell the 2 to get that profit. Yes. But then if we then looking at, okay, well, at what point do we tip from debt to being able to leverage some of that profit, i.e. retain the units? If we were to retain the units at even 50% loan to value, yes. That 2 units then becomes 4 units. So we've only got to sell 6. So the market risk decreases in terms of number of units we have to sell. Yes. That is one of the key reasons that we, bread and butter, if you like, is 2 and 3 bedroom family homes. Because in pretty much every area, there is a need for 2 and 3 bedroom family homes. And B, from an exit and a kind of a diverse and adaptable exit strategy that you can kind of move around, is that you be able to get exit finance, mostly on 2 and 3 bedroom family homes. So if you're building 4 and 5 bedroom, you know, executive homes, you're probably not going to get the exit finance, not going to meet the requirements and the stress testing, etc. So you're very, very higher risk with those type of homes. They might be the aspirational homes that people want to buy. When you say development, people talk about lovely, beautiful homes, but you can create some lovely houses and really serve a purpose at that kind of 2 and 3 bedroom home end, really. And once you've been through the process of being able to get the relevant approvals in place, there's certain costs involved in getting to that point. Then raising the funding to build out and develop the site, in your experience, is that much easier then to attract that investment at that point, because it takes a lot of the uncertainty out of the project away? Absolutely. I'm not going to say it's easy, because I don't think any of the process is particularly easy, but it's very interesting when we talk to funders or investors, and we have done in the past, when we're trying to maybe raise some money to put into, say, planning, which might be slightly riskier or something like that. It's much more difficult to raise funds on that side, as you've already mentioned, in terms of the risk levels and the certainty. But once you've got permission in place, then there's quite a lot of funding avenues that are available to you. So ideally, we try and connect with people that obviously have got the belief and the trust and in ourselves and our kind of our background and what we've done previously, sort of underpin that, to come in on the journey, you know, a bit earlier, you know, help us get the permissions, put a bit of money at a bit higher risk, possibly, but then get the benefits maybe all the way through the project. Because ultimately, as I said before, once you've got the plan permission in place, then there's a lot of avenues, you know, your development finance and you know. Sometimes people think that's the point, the values increase significantly. It has increased, but there, as you mentioned, there's still opportunities to create more value within that. The way you build them, your value engineering, the way you fund and structure the funding side of it as well. Definitely. The types of units that you might be building, like if you custom build, you know, we're dealing with landowners. I'm dealing with an opportunity at the moment where it got passed to me from a contact in my network who's not in the land side, but relatively new in the kind of investing and SAs, rent to rents, all that kind of stuff, deal sourcing, etc. So they've come across a contact, then they find there's got a piece of land, it's got a bungalow on it at the moment. They've had plans drawn up previously for 14 units. We have a look at it. I've had a look at it recently. You go, but going back to deliverable value, you're not going to be able to build 14 units on there. It just won't get permission. It's overdevelopment. So then we go and we look at it and go, actually, I think there's an opportunity there to build maybe 3, maybe 4, more likely to be 3 custom homes or self-build homes, maybe. Keeping the existing asset there, that's a bungalow there that probably has a value of about 350,000 already. To build 14, you've got to demolish that. Well, that's 350,000.
You just lost.
You just lost effectively, because you've got to clear the site, and so you've got to get that value back. 14 units going into affordable homes, you've got the impact of that. Lots of things at play. So by maybe taking the less is more approach in this example, we've got maybe 3 self-build homes. We've got the existing dwelling there. It's a family, generational again, and it's potentially a good way of tax mitigation. Family can the father can build a self-build in his name, the son can build a self-build in his name, etc., and we might be able to build the other one in our name or something. So there's lots of ways that you can approach things. So it all depends on going back to what they're looking to achieve and what solutions we're able to present that can get them closer to that objective, really. And that's a very good example of what you build.
In the property space, the market's constantly evolving. Different strategies become the flavor of the month, and certain things work well because of market conditions. This particular strategy, how do you see it evolving in the next few years? Do you see it as being constant? Do you think there's a lot of factors that could change how attractive or less attractive it becomes in the coming few years?
Is that in relation to the custom builds?
Not to
or
finding
sourcing
sites and developing them out.
I think it's going to be an interesting time, certainly, economically, politically. Obviously with the recent, when we've recording this, the change of government, there's a big drive towards building X amount of thousands of homes a year, 360,000. I think they've.
I think it was 1.5 million originally, or 5 years now, 1.8 something.
Now they've increased that. Just because 1.5 is definitely achievable, let's increase it a little bit further. But it's going to unlock opportunities. But it is going to unlock opportunities in specific areas of specific unit types. Are there going to be loads of opportunities to go, as I said before, go and build 4 and 5 bedroom executive homes? Probably not. But are there going to be opportunities where you can build affordable homes, first time homes, 2 and 3 bedroom family homes that really do make a difference? There's going to be plenty of opportunity in that sector. So it's about positioning yourself to take advantage of those opportunities, and as long as you're offering value all the way through the process, then that is where you need to sort of position, and that's where you need to be. In terms of identifying land, obviously there's been a lot of even historically, it's very much been pushed towards building on brownfield sites. So previously developed land, we don't need to develop in rural areas or the green belt or greenfields, because there's already enough brownfield. There isn't enough brownfield sites to keep up with the numbers that we're trying to hit. Existing use values and existing expectations of brownfield land is often too high to make the sites deliverable. Values in certain areas aren't high enough to account for the build costs and the funding and the developer contributions and the profit, and in order to actually develop a site out without any significant kind of intervention from government in the form of grants, etc. And even with that kind of intervention, it might not even be possible. So logically, in order to get numbers, we are going to have to start spreading out a little bit. You mentioned, I think, at the start of this kind of recording, that only a little bit of the kind of land of country is built on, and ultimately it is about expanding in an appropriate, sustainable, logical manner.
Yes.
The problem that we've faced as land acquisition, planning, development over the last few years is it's kind of been a say no to everything scenario and sector. There is more movement now, I feel, and more lobbying and more groups that are trying to kind of the YIMBYs, as they call it, yes in my backyard, and trying to get homes delivered. And ultimately, if we're going to deliver 1.5, 1.8 million homes, then we are going to have to make changes and reform to the process in general, not just the planning process. That's quite often they go, okay, we've got planning reform. You've got to make reform and improvements all the way through from, you know, legals and conveyancing and acquiring land and then the planning and then the delivery in order to deliver homes in a timely...
full process, not
the
just
full
a part of
process.
it,
You've got to take a more of a holistic sort of whole helicopter view of the whole process rather than specifically focusing in on, say, planning reform. It does need reform, it does need resourcing, it does need a bit more funding, it does need a look at, you know, people in positions in terms of decision making and determination, planning committees. You know, quite often that's the first port of call for major developments, and you quite often knocking at a closed door because a lot of the people aren't they're not experienced, or they don't understand enough about the sector and the development process. And if you don't understand enough about it, the default is always no. So and that's the difficulty, and that's been some of the big challenges that we've been facing, you know, in the recent past. That it's, you know, the planning process is becoming even more opinionated rather than based on fact. I mean, in some cases, we've had a couple of applications this year that have been turned down at committee, and one that failed at appeal. In some cases, we're probably a little bit ahead of our time with what we were proposing, because on some of the sites we were proposing 50% affordable homes and delivering to really high standards of sustainability. Fast forward to now, at time of recording this, a lot of the stuff that's coming out of central government now is increasing the number of affordable homes to 50%. Funny. Building to higher standards. So it is, you don't necessarily want to be the point of the spear and leading the way, and you want to kind of be just behind that, really, in terms of taking advantage of opportunities that have already been identified.
Just behind that is a good place to be.
Absolutely.
Let somebody else lead the way. And you quite rightly said, often when you're trying to get through things through planning, you've got committees deal with who not really au fait with the planning process necessarily, and also the commercialities of building and constructing these type of developments. And let's say you get a no there, well, it could add significant cost and time delays to even then take you to appeal. Maybe you get a positive result at appeal because, you know, it should have got approved originally, but that can also put people off going through that process because the financial costs as well.
Absolutely, time's the biggest one there. Obviously, financial costs and implications are a big thing. You know, we might have put a significant sum into the planning process. Throughout all of our planning strategy, you know, all our applications, we do plan to go to appeal, because again, this is about trying to control as much, or trying to mitigate and keep everything within your control that you can. Well, if the determination is via committee that you're not actually in control of that, then even if your planning officer and the LPA have given their support, it doesn't mean that you'll get the decision in the end. So if you're not in control of that result, then you've got to plan for plan B, plan C, etc. So it's really important to have those kind of those different scenarios in place, and ultimately going specifically into committees, as I said before, that it's becoming so much more opinionated. And you know, it's normally that you've got to have a valid planning reason for refusal. Well, we've experienced with some of our own schemes and other people's schemes where there isn't a legitimate reason for refusal, because of various reasons. It might be, you know, the paragraphs within the 𝗵𝗵𝗹 are engaged, and we've got the right planning balance, and you know, we're delivering to a need. We're doing all the things that we need to do.
Yes.
But there's no statutory reasons for refusal from any of the consultees or anything like that. But then you quite often get people, if they don't like it or don't want it, trying to formulate a reason that sounds like it's a planning reason.
Yes.
And even in that scenario where they say, well, highways is a good example, where highways have got no objection, and then they'll say, well, no, it's dangerous, pedestrians and crossings and, you know, speeding, etc., etc. Yes. Despite all the information and all the professional consultants reports that we've done, etc. And then in that scenario, they may try and refuse it based on a highways reason that they have formulated.
Yes.
Now, if that meeting isn't run strongly enough by the chair and the legal representatives that are at the meeting, then that decision could get carried, and it could get refused at committee. In certain circumstances, there may be a right to actually come again in the next meeting, a deferral, for example, which we've had experience of.
Okay.
But if you're getting the wrong decision or a rejection at committee, whether it's a just reason or not, there is no accountability. There is no sort of comeuppance, if you like. You then have to go down the appeal route. That then might add 6, 9, 12 months to it, and then things over that period of time could change.
Yes. And there's no, as you said, there's no consequences for the committee members who made the decision in the first place. There's just no consequences there.
There's no consequences at all. Even in the planning authority itself, you know, a lot of planning authorities are underfunded, under-resourced. A lot of case officers are, you know, overworked, got big caseloads, etc. You know, a lot of councils are, you know, bankrupt effectively.
Yes.
So we're not saying that there isn't genuine problems that organisations are facing, but it's so key to our livelihood that you pay your fees and you do everything that you need to do, and you have these statutory periods, and you know, for responses and for applications to be determined, for them to get basically thrown out the window.
Yes.
And no comeuppance, no accountability, there's nothing.
It's crazy. And I think this is why it's so challenging in this space, and the few people that succeed and understand it do very well out of it. So just before we start wrapping up then, what are a few things that you see people are making huge mistakes when they're going through this process of finding sites to take through the development process?
I think certainly some of the biggest mistakes that we've seen is securing land at either too high a value or with too rigid deal structures that don't account for any market movements or anything that they can't control themselves. So you might secure a piece of land. It's really, you know, if you're a landowner, Sarge, and you go, you've got an expectation of £1 million for your land, and I say I want an option agreement at £1 million or at 950, that's really close to what you're looking for. The chances are you're going to say yes. We're going to go through that process. We're going to sign the contract. From my purpose, I'm successful because I've got an option contract that's going to deliver this amount of money on paper, and I can do that loads of times. But if that's not actually achievable and not realistic, then the piece of paper there is actually a curse. Yeah. Because it can then, you know, trigger some pretty significant problems for you further down the line. So being able to identify land, connect with landowners and secure deals at the right level with the right contracts and the right clauses is absolutely paramount. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that we see people make. They don't have the perhaps it's naivety, or perhaps it's over exuberance or over excitement in terms of doing their due diligence on build costs or values, and they overdo the values and they undercut the costs, and they come up with these land values, or they become motivated to buy rather than you know,
working with the motivated sellers.
Motivated sellers. They become motivated buyers because they go, okay, well, the landowner says they want £1 million for their land, and as has only got it to 700, how can we get it to 1 million?
Yes. Forcing it to fit.
But rather than doing it in a deal structure that's workable, they change a few numbers and they try and get it a bit closer, and then they, you know, become motivated to buy.
Yes.
So that's one of the probably the biggest mistake that we see people making. And the other one, to be honest with you, and this isn't a plug in any way, in all honesty, but people don't get the right advice at the right time. There's so much effort and focus on getting professional consultants,
yes,
planning consultants, architects, QSs, you know, all these people that they need that are part of the process. But if you're not experienced enough in leading that process, being the lead developer,
yes,
then the first person that you actually probably need is an experienced developer that's been there and done that can hold your hand through it, or be that, yes, sounding board, and provide you with the right advice, validate some of the things that you're coming up with, help you manage your consultants, because that will result in you becoming, if you don't have that foresight, or you don't have that assistance, or you've not been through it before yourself, you will become consultant led. And if you're consultant led, there might be fantastic consultants, but they're not invested in the end result. They will get their money and their fees regardless.
Yes.
And you need to manage them in the right way. So the most appropriate sort of method is becoming developer led. If you're not there yet, you need to connect with somebody that can help you become that experienced lead developer.
That's some great advice there. And as you said, if you start being led by the consultants, there's the holistic bit has been lost. Everyone's doing their own little bits, but you need to really pull the whole thing together. It says, make sure it's deliverable, make sure it's workable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just kind of the spoke and the wheel. You know, the hub of the, yes, of the wheel is the strongest part, you know, and that's where you are as the lead developer, and the spokes are your various consultants support, that you need. So without that rigidity and that strength in the middle, then it becomes weak.
Fantastic. Brynley, this has been great learning, great knowledge for people watching this. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I guess on the land side, so we run a business called Your Land Partner. Best way to connect with me would be via email. So that's Bryn, BRYN, @yourlandpartner.co.uk. On the consulting side, any developers or any businesses that found value in this and perhaps need a little bit of experience insight, a bit of experience added to their team, then email will be Bryn, BRYN, @futurehomes.group.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.